Welcome back, Honors. Oh, man. All right, so we're going to cruise right now because I'm not trying to make this too long on you. Because like we said today in class, the poor Persians don't get any play as it is, so I'm about to violate them even further and not even give them the credit probably that they deserve. But also because the bell's going to ring here in about like 12 minutes, so I'm trying to keep this to a decent length. Anyway, so we started talking today about Persepolis, right? The Persians, their ideas of tolerance under Cyrus the Great. He's the man. What's up, right? So these are other images of Persepolis. The coolest things about the images of Persepolis right here is, of course, like the showings of the unification of several styles of art, but then also like the intricate grid work of the entire city, all right? So very large area, very well planned, very laid out, and just it represents a model of an amazing infrastructure behind a very large empire. That is a very underrated group, right? So continuing on with Persepolis, though, all right, so this is a PowerPoint, unfortunately. I hate PowerPoint, but I've never switched this over to Prezi. So if my face is covering anything, I apologize, but it's just kind of the way, yeah, see, because every time I click on something, it's going to do that instead. So anyway, no, not pages. Anyway, there we go. So Darius the First actually erected Persepolis, right? And would be followed up by his son Xerxes, who's going to rule from 45 to 465. So there are three big Persian leaders you need to know. You need to know Darius, or excuse me, you need to know Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes, right? Now, one of the coolest parts that you can actually still see in Persepolis is called the Adana, right? The Adana is actually an audience hall. It's where the king of Persia would actually meet people and entertain them, okay? So Persepolis is in modern-day Iran. So the Adana actually was filled with these columns that were 60 feet tall. So that is a ridiculous height when you're talking about the height of like a building. 60 foot tall, and every single one of them had this right here, that twin bull or ibex topping to every single one. The really cool thing about it is these leaps forward in architecture were even further forward than the Greeks, actually. So the Greeks are really well known for three types of columns: Doric, Ionic, Corinthian. The Persians actually kind of reinvented the wheel a little bit and made and made their own columns, right? So they had 36 columns in total with bowl-shaped tops. Now, also, there were reliefs all over the wall, very emblematic of their takings from the Assyrians and their styles of art. The Persians were like the ultimate unifier. Every time they would like actually take over an area, they would grab on to parts of the society and kind of keep them safe. And actually were very into taking intelligence from other people and using it to their own advantage, right? Which is another big trait. Remember, we talked about how the Persians kind of simply would just later on become like the empire of the like nation of Islam, right? Under you could call them the Umayyads or the Abbasids, actually, or two separate Muslim caliphates, right? So even during the Muslim era, the Arabic people descendant of the Persians were just always well known for holding and grasping onto intelligence, right? So every time they would take over an area, they would usually use that intelligence, right? So now, the reliefs on the walls actually symbolize Persian guards called immortals, right? And the immortals, there were 10,000 of them that protected the city and the ruler that were all carved into the walls, right? There were also huge ramps that led up to the Adana, enabling chariots to actually enter the hall so they could entertain guests that rode in, all right? Very cool. This is what we believe the Adana actually looked like during the time of the Persians. Very open space, huge, like, just architecturally phenomenal piece. And unfortunately, it no longer stands. But we do have several of the columns still. And as you can see, the 60 columns, or excuse me, the 60-foot tall columns, 36 in total. It actually looks very Parthenon-esque if you actually look at it in a certain way. So it's a very good representation of the cross-sections of people that the Persians actually took over. Also, you can see another grasping of the Assyrian art styles from the Persians. Of course, the hunt, but this one, of course, is a lion hunting an ibex. And this actually is a bunch of the images of the immortals. Speaking of the... Oh, man, I forgot. All right, so really quick, we've got to talk about Persian Faith. Persian Faith under Cyrus the Great was actually a really cool monotheistic, right, style of religion. Now, the reason why I say it's monotheistic is it's kind of monotheistic and it's kind of not. It's not as strict as, say, Judaism, but it did attempt to unify all of its people underneath one supreme God, right? And that God's name was Ahura Mazda, right? And now somebody tomorrow is going to raise their hand and be like, I thought you said they were monotheistic, but it says they have a bad God. The bad God, I mean, basically is like their version of Satan, all right? His name's Ahriman, right? He's actually behind every negative feeling and thought, according to the Persians, like jealousy, greed, hatred, violence, right? But their good god is known as Ahura Mazda, which is the same kind of, we believe, is like ripoff of Ashur, actually like bestowing faith and power of rule upon different groups. Sorry. Y'all are over in Mr. Keogh's class right now, and it's just looking a little rowdy. He's standing up in front of y'all, looking all sketchy like he does. All right, anyway, now, they also entertain the ideas, the concepts of heaven and hell, which is actually a really neat concept, because it's actually one of the only people that actually still use that in modern day are, of course, Christians, right? So, how did Cyrus the Great and Darius the first keep control of such a vast empire? Well, they do some really genius things. After learning some things from the Egyptians, they begin to break down their entire empire into provinces, right? They appoint royal governors at every single province called satraps, and then they were all loyal to the emperor and did his bidding, right? Very interesting infrastructure, right? That right there is a satrap actually receiving taxes from some of the people that they are actually overseeing in a province, right? So, also, this is really cool, there were royal spies inside of the entire Persian Empire. So they actually spied on all the citizens and the governor and on the governors to make sure that they actually weren't going to steal anything or revolt against them. This is kind of where the Assyrians went wrong, right? The Assyrians were just too brutal, and they killed everybody and deported them all over their empire, right? But the Persians actually believed in the ideas of tolerance and actually doing this secretly, right? Then there was the Royal Road, right? The Royal Road is a very, very cool concept. It's 1,677 miles long with 111 relay stations, right? It's actually almost like a highway. This predates the Silk Road as well, and it actually is, if you ask me, probably a little more impactful than the Silk Road, just simply due to the originality of the idea, right? So other smaller roads are going to branch off the Royal Road. These relay stations actually have rest areas, and you could swap a horse out so you could continue on your journey. The entire Royal Road could be traveled in a week by a horseman. Caravans took about a month. But the amazing idea about it is the Persians had an idea that the Europeans didn't even come back across on until the 1600s. The ideas of just infrastructure, right? Write that word down really quick. It's super important. Infrastructure. Oh, God, it's a great word. All right. infrastructure. Infrastructure. Infrastructure is it's the way that you can transmit information and people throughout an area, right? Like roads, post office, telephone, infrastructure, right? That's infrastructure. But the Persians came up with empire-spanning infrastructure first. So many of the other empires didn't even have these things, right? So, but actually you can see right there in the black line, that's the Royal Road. And then the green line, that's as the Royal Road began to expand over the years, right? Now, really quick, let's talk about Darius, right? We've got about 5-ish minutes left. If I get cut off by the bell, we'll finish the rest up in class tomorrow. Now, Darius the First, massively influential leader. Not actually the son of Cyrus the Great, which a lot of people actually get wrong, including me. At one point in my existence, I immediately assumed that it was a hierarchical dynastic system, which it actually is in Persia, but Darius actually was believed to take over in a different fashion. He was actually one of the members of the king's bodyguard. Now, he overthrew the king in 522 BC. Now, the story goes, though, that he actually didn't overthrow Cyrus, okay, because Cyrus is considered Cyrus the Great, right? So Cyrus the Great had actually died, and his son was poised to take over. Now, a lot of people and a lot of historians believe that the chances of Darius, actually just throwing a coup and basically just taking over with a contingent of the military and some of the immortals is much more likely than the story I'm about to tell you. But he did take over and took power and created a very well-organized, efficient government, brought peace and stability to the empire, expanded the empire by 500 miles, but unfortunately is going to hit a roadblock when he tries to conquer the Greeks, right? So he's actually the guy that stops the Ionian Revolt and is in part the first Persian invasion. He also introduced a money-based economy, which is genius, all right? So anyway, so we talked about that in class today. But the story of how Darius actually took over, that's Xerxes, hold on. The story of how Darius actually took over is a really, really neat one, and I'll tell you in these last couple of minutes, and then we'll stop here for today, and then we'll pick up on Xerxes tomorrow and wrap up Persia. And then I think, under the pleadings of several students, we are going to wait and push your test to Monday, all right? We're going to do that to give you several days to study. We'll give you an entire weekend to study, and also because the word on the street is some of the soccer members are going to be here till midnight on Thursday. So I'm trying to be as fair as I possibly can. All right? So anyway, now, but the story of how Darius took over, right? The story goes that he was actually Cyrus's most trusted immortal, his most trusted bodyguard, right? He falls in love with the princess, okay? He falls in love with one of Cyrus's daughters. And the story goes, though, that Cyrus dies and that his son is poised to take over. But at the coronation ceremony, the son turns around and Darius looks at him from being so close to Cyrus for his entire life. He's like, that's not the king. That's not the prince. That's an imposter. And apparently a man was dressed as the prince and was trying to take over in a shady way. And Darius, in front of everybody, goes up and kills this imposter and then puts his foot on top of him and then becomes like, and then it like is installed as the king of Persia following his heroics. Marries the princess, amongst several other women, and then actually becomes the leader of the Persian Empire after basically destroying the would-be king, right? Very, very cool story. I've always really been a fan of that one. But anyway, we're going to pick up on Xerxes tomorrow, and he's kind of nuts, and we're going to talk about like his superstitions, and I'll talk to you guys a little bit tomorrow. So y'all have a great evening. See you guys later.